panel discussion of the Business Today HR Forum. So today's topic is why do HR professionals need to have lateral functional experience? Does the skill set really create a differentiator, truly create a differentiator? We could begin with Toril.
I think with the function evolving the way it has, so I remember when 23 years ago when I started working, you had what were called IR and personnel managers. Those then grew into HR heads. Then they grew into HR directors, and now they're either CPOs or CHROs or what have you. So really, is it just the designation that changed, or was there something a little bit more to it than that? And I think that really answers why you need a little bit of lateral experience. What really changes the demands that companies or organizations have on the function today? From moving from base essential skills, which is the core of HR, to systems and processes, to integrating with the business, and then actually even managing external stakeholders. Today, HR is expected to do it all. And with that kind of expectation, there is often a need to have far more exposure to the actual business. And that's where the lateral experience becomes critical.
If you notice how the HR function itself has evolved over a period of, let's say, a couple of decades, a lot of transactions, a lot of activities, a lot of things that HR used to do have become standardized and automated to a large extent. So what it has done is, on the positive side, it has brought a lot of intellectual heft to the HR task itself. But as I see it, today, HR's job is either a diagnostician or an interpreter or a communicator, or giving your own 2 bits into defining the future of the organization. Now, all of these roles you will notice, either while interfacing with people or while sitting down and thinking about future, would require a much deeper understanding of the organization, the business, the products, the markets, the kind of competitive forces that work on a particular segment or a sector. And the less as an HR person I understand that adjacency, the less effective I am, the more dogmatic I am likely to be, the more what I call tool-driven I am likely to be. For me to be effective, for me to understand the whole business, a multifunctional exposure is necessary. And when I say exposure, I do not mean a skimming exposure to everything, but really a deep understanding of 1 or 2 things definitively beyond HR. So yes, today more than it is necessary, it's a survival skill for a HR person who aspires to impact the organization long term.
So I genuinely believe that HR professionals anywhere in the world have over a period of time been doing only 6 jobs, and they will continue to do only those 6 jobs, which are get, give, grow, guard, guide, and govern. Now, those 6 jobs that they are supposed to perform are not going to change, but what has really happened is that we are now living in a world of transition where we are moving away from the classical belief that we were generating people-centric business organizations to now we are trying to build business-centric people networks. So where the organization's prime focus was that it had to run its business with a people-centricism in mind, which is where the whole paternalistic aspect of people management came in, we are now shifting the entire gears to trying to build people networks which are more business-centric rather than people-centric business organizations. So now the challenge for us is to do those give, get, grow, guard, guide roles in a changed environment where businesses don't want to be people-centric, but they want actually people-centric networks to support the business value creation journey. And that is the challenge.
So I think it's very similar to what my earlier panelists have said, with just a small twist to it. I'm not too sure whether it is essential for a great HR professional to have had that stint. So it's good. It definitely adds value. But I do know of a whole lot of HR folks who've remained in the function all their lives without having moved out to being business partners. and have done extremely well. But I think the key point is, do you understand the business? Are you seen as a strategic HR partner to the business? How much do you really get involved in shaping that strategy? And whatever that business strategy is, how are you able to translate that so that the HR function is completely aligned to achieving those business objectives? So I think the key is an appreciation, like Adil said, and it works both ways, you know, HR appreciation of business and vice versa. So my take is, yes, it definitely helps, especially since I've come myself from the business. I would definitely endorse it. It definitely gives you a different perspective.
So I think the wider question is, it's not only a lateral move from different functions which have helped me, but what has also helped is doing different roles in HR. Where it has helped lateral moves from a different function is it's given me an insight into understanding the business strategy. Typically in sales, you try to understand business strategy, you understand the product strategy, you understand financials here, and then try to relate it to customers. So the customer orientation is one area which has helped me in sales, which I have been able to translate that into HR as well. The second is a commercial orientation. In today's world, I mean, business, it is a business of people at the end of the day, but it's also about finance. So that's one competency which has helped me in the early stages of my career, is develop a commercial orientation, and that's where the lateral functional experience has come in. Now within HR, getting an orientation on learning and development, leadership hiring has given me an opportunity to upgrade my own skills, go through various certifications, whether it's on psychometric instruments, whether it's in coaching credentials from ICF. All of that helps me in my current roles. So whenever I do engage with centers of excellence, I'm able to do it on a similar footing, rather than be very heavily dependent on them for all solutions and answers.
HR standalone by itself becomes too formulated. It's like treadmill. You are doing a lot of things that we learned in the HR textbooks and HR colleges, that what HR is all about. So you put your training programs in place, you do your, you do your treadmill, and you keep doing the same communications program, and you do your negotiation skills program, and you do your finance for non-finance programs, and you run your own classical performance management systems, irrespective of its strategic connect with what the business was doing. So my learnings and my recommendations are that whilst there are multiple opportunities available, make it a point to take those career breaks that you may get. Insist upon your management that if they really value you and want to retain you, it's not about giving you a huge retention bonus, which should be the determinant, but it is about you being given a career move which enhances you to build your capability and competency for future, and which should be your determinant of how your career should be built up.
I think the first step is for you to raise your hand and say that you're interested, because one really wants to match what the organization can offer to your own aspiration. So the last thing one would do is to force it upon somebody. But yes, if you raise your hand and you say that you're interested in having this kind of an exposure, I think the organization provides for that in a very structured manner.
If at all you have to understand business, you have to start believing that as you keep rising in the HR hierarchy, somewhere within the top 2 layers, you have to start looking yourself as a business leader. As you start yourself looking as a business leader, and you should, theoretically, whether you reach or not. We talked a lot about how non-HR people walked into HR. We have not spoken about, can HR people walk out of HR into business? And probably that's also because of the paradigm that we set around ourselves. So if we start looking at ourselves as a part of the top management or part of the leadership of the organization, I think our desire and willingness to get exposed to other functions will follow.
I know you have a strong point of view on this, so can you share?
So, I think we're talking a lot about lateral exposure, and obviously it is useful, and obviously it adds value. However, it's a bit like saying with each new thing that happens, the old one dies. I think there is a place for the specialist as well. There are aspects of the role that very clearly need you to have very deep knowledge of whether it is regulatory, whether it is compliance, whether it is how you put together a system, etc. Which if you bring in someone who's never done an HR role, they're great on business strategy, but they may completely misguide the organization on some of the core basics that an organization needs. Secondly, I think a lot depends on the stage the organization is at. So, there are different stages, for different sizes of organizations. If you have a situation where the need of the organization is actually to, let's say, rebuild after a difficult time, you actually need a specialist who understands how to go about that, as opposed to a situation where you want someone to come in and shake up things because the organization has got a little too set in its ways, in which case actually someone who's outside of the functional specialist area can come and do that better. So I don't think it's an either or. I think you need both. You do need the specialization to be able to value add to a lot of the core that is part of the function. At the same time, the exposure to the non-specialist aspect rounds it off very well and helps you when you come to the stage where you are actually driving the function a lot more.
So within HR, today we are talking about specialists, but I could see in the future you do need super specialists. Now, I'll give examples here. When we talk about compensation and benefits, if you were to relate our skills today as compared to the Western world in highly specialized functions like compensation benefits, organization design, and change management, it's basically generalists doing these jobs. And we are branding them as specialists here. There is no formal training here. And formal training, believe me, has to have very, very specialized training. A lot of us have learned from experience, which is invaluable, no doubt about it. But is it accompanied by doing the right thing? Is there a trial and error method in this? I think these are all questions which really need addressal. And unfortunately, we don't have any mechanism in India which really trains people to be specialists. And that's why we've not been able to leverage a specialist role in HR effectively. But is there a demand in the industry today and tomorrow? Yes, for organizations which are large, which are global in nature, there is a demand for that specialization.
Performance appraisal, what really works? Don't we all want to know that? What really works in terms of performance appraisals? Whether performance appraisals are needed at all is a debate that's going on in global circles. So we'll start with Mr. Gautam. You can start with your opening thoughts on the subject, and then we'll delve into deeper issues.
First issue which really comes to my mind is every organization is battling with the same point. Does it work for my organization? And the questions and answers for each organization are very different. And I think that's a fun part of it. Some organizations are looking at performance appraisal as differentiation for performance. Some are looking at it as really the feed forward for better performance for people. And some are saying, use it for frequent coaching, feedback, communication. Some are saying get rid of that entire system and don't have it. So I think that makes it pretty interesting. Also, I think the other issue is if you ask in any organization how many people are happy about it, unfortunately, it's a HR nightmare to ask that question. But I think the bottom line is not that, in my opinion. I don't think you should get driven by what employees or what stakeholders say from a sentiment standpoint. And that I would say after a lot of thinking about it. I think the key is what works for the organization performance should be the performance management system. And if you have not articulated that among yourself in the organization at the top, then obviously you have a wrong design in the place, and you can never get it right. Second is, if you can't get employees to look forward to the February and March in getting engaged with it, then I think you got a wrong system.
The entire bit on performance appraisals, can be a very expensive waste of time and money. Unless, in my world, it meets 4 criteria. The first criteria is to what extent is it forward focused instead of, lamenting about the past. To what extent has it brought in perspectives of everybody that the role touches, To what extent is it fed back in transparency to the employee? And to what extent have we kind of formally and structuredly de-linked this year's performance with what this person is capable of, yeah? So I forgot my marriage anniversary doesn't mean that I'm a pathetic spouse, right? It just means I need to buy you a ring later. So it's pretty much similar is really, where I stand.
Some of the things that I've observed, because it's so difficult to, it's actually a struggle to come out and see what really works. Reward rating linkage, if done well, works. Second is, I would say that if one can be non-judgmental, it works better. So when you talk about judgment of people, perhaps what is happening is that lesser emphasis is being laid on why is the performance not good enough than what. What is the number? What is the report card? What is the, above average, good, very good, and so on. But the why is extremely important. I also think what can work is not beating up people for incomplete tasks. And I'll use a little bit of HR mumbo jumbo. There's something called the Zeigarnik effect. The Zeigarnik effect is something where people remember, is supposed to be remembering. Bluma Zeigarnik was a lady who did this research. People seem to remember incomplete tasks better than completed tasks. For example, a waiter who's forgotten to take the bill possibly will understand better about what is the sequence of food that the person has eaten and so on. But appraisals perhaps focus too much on the completed task and lay very little emphasis on that.
I don't think performance appraisal is an HR agenda. And this is the problem. We have loved it because we feel this is our little nest. It is a leadership agenda. It is not an HR issue. And while all of us here are HR practitioners, the question is, appraisal for what? What is performance? Performance in what time context? Performance in isolation, performance in relationship with. And I think this is where we've all got lost. We've all tried to cut, copy, paste. Unfortunately, we've made the exercise so staid, so static, so boring, so form-based, so formalized, so ritualistic that we have killed the intent that was behind an agenda of performance appraisal. And the logic to me, ladies and gentlemen, is simple. If after a cricket match, the coach appraises the team and your performance on the track and we don't object, when the board appraises the business performance and we don't object, when class teachers appraise us at the end of every term with terminal tests and gives us or gave us stars and moons and we never objected, why, ladies and gentlemen, do we get so sensitive and upset about performance appraisals of people in corporations? It is not an issue of philosophy or purpose. It's an issue of delivery.
The good thing about performance appraisals is, like Prabir said, it's a topic that one can keep going on and on about. I want to take a spin coming off from where Prabir left it, right? So is it about, is it philosophical, or is it about the philosophy, or is it about how it's getting implemented? And I'm sure the reams that have been written about, a lot got written about Accenture doing away with and embracing the new world of what we call as performance achievement. And this journey started about a year back when our chief executive, Pierre, went out to our CHRO and our leadership team to us and said, performance management, the way we are doing it, doesn't work for us anymore. And it was very interesting for a company that talks about high performance delivered, and we work with our clients to enable them to be high performancing. Why would we say that it doesn't work for us? And that's what forced an introspection on us. And I think what the realization was very clear. In an environment where with social, with digital and technology trending the way it is today, and if you look at the last 50 years and you looked at where the Fortune 500 companies have been, 88% of them have fallen off the radar, which clearly means that organizations have not been agile enough to respond to the environment that they are operating in. And then compounded with that, the competition that one is seeing in the marketplace today, and that is causing a spur of new skill sets rising by the moon every day, right? And that is forcing organizations to really think through what should be the DNA and the core of the organization. If that's what our core and the DNA of the organization is going to be, how do we therefore inculcate those behaviors, reward our people, and be able to manage our talent?
I think the key point is you need to really begin with that fundamental question, you know, what is going to help your performance? And not get caught with things like delivery to begin with. I think delivery comes at the end, in my opinion, you know, where Prabir was talking about delivery is the key. Ultimately, yes, employee has to feel that delivery is liked by him. But I think that's a secondary point to me. The first is the business.
The core of the matter, in my understanding, is really getting clarity on purpose, you know. And if the purpose is really to help the business perform, you know, the rest of it kind of follows. And I mean, hand to heart, I don't think anybody gets out of home in the morning to say, today I'm going to go and underperform. Yeah, so I think everyone who gets out of home in the morning wants to go and perform. The business wants performance, and so do all the stakeholders. Eventually, who wants that performance? I mean, it's not like one function or, you know, one leader. Eventually, the business wants that outcome, yeah? And therefore, getting clarity on roles is probably the first piece there, and getting clarity on goals sounds super simple. But trust me, one of the most complex things to do, you know, when you're working in conglomerates with, you know, multiple lines of reporting, multiple KPIs, you know, and so on and so forth. So I think that is like probably the first thing. And net, you know, understanding that the net agenda is to help the business perform.
To me, the issue is, how do you make sure that you try and tie, at least starting from the top, people and their appraisal expectations, their expectations of their 365 days of that year to what I call a shared destiny.
Okay.
If you start segmenting every guy's role so sharply right at the top, you know, you've started kind of achieving your targets and getting all your ticks right, but you are not going to be actually achieving the larger organizational purpose that you've set for yourself. And I've seen that in many, many companies. And I believe, therefore, when you simplify an appraisal system, in trying to make it work, start by building more shared goals right at the top.
We have been able to inculcate behaviors in our line managers to be able to accept and give feedback, not just from subordinates, but also from peers, right? So if I'm working with somebody and I realize that they are dragging themselves in certain areas, it becomes my responsibility to be able to coach them on what can help them get better. Or if I see things that my peer is doing fantastically well, then it becomes my responsibility to give that positive stroke to say, I see you doing these situations or these client situations, managing them phenomenally well. There's a lot for us to learn. The intention being so that you can have more of that happening. So I think it's a culture shift that we are going through. I'm not saying that we have arrived, it's a journey, but I think some of these have been big learnings and enablers for us.
We all believe that performance appraisal is not a year-end activity, or even for that matter, a half-year or a quarter activity. It is actually a real-time activity. You have a solution that will make it work. Whether that it's getting a 360-degree feedback. I mean, you don't have to wait for an annual process to get you feedback. If you are a manager who's worth your salt, you would pick up the phone, or as you're talking to different stakeholders, use it to play back. Now, I can tell you as HR practitioners, many of us would have in different ways been attempting it in our different experiences in different organizations. The challenge is, this does not appear to many organizations to be an expectation of a manager. And I think this is where the focus of conversation should happen. This is where the resolve has to come for the subject to actually get answered. What actually works? This is the only thing which has to work.
Thank you very much, everybody. And please give a huge round of applause to our panelists.